Hi guys, I'm back with another video. Today I'm gonna show you how to build a music server. Those of you who don't know my person, who don't know what I'm doing, I will say that I've been doing computer audio for more than 10 years professionally. And I started JPLAY in 2011. JPLAY is a software player for Windows, for audiophiles. But as a hobbyist, I've been doing this more than 20 years. So I think I can honestly say that I have good experience in computer audio. So in today's video, I'm gonna show you how to build a good sounding music server. Music servers are essentially PCs. Any music server essentially is a PC, is a computer, and you can build one yourself. It's not very difficult. I will show you step by step what to do to build to assemble a PC for a music server. So here on the table in front of me, I have the motherboard. This particular motherboard comes from manufacturer of server boards called Supermicro. I like the motherboards from this manufacturer, and in fact I've been using these motherboards exclusively since 2012. I assembled many music servers using these motherboards. Why? Because during my experiments I learned that the motherboards from this particular manufacturer sound pretty good. So I stick with Supermicro. In the description below I will mention the exact model and the list of components for this build, so don't worry, you can always check it later. This motherboard is already assembled. For a CPU I'm using Intel Xeon. Intel Xeon because this is also a server CPU, and this is a similar story to the motherboard because I learned more than 10 years ago through experiments that server CPUs sound better. I learned that server CPUs like Xeon offer better sound quality. What is the explanation? Why is this the case? Why does the Xeon sound better than another consumer model CPU? I don't know to be sure, but one of the reasons is that Xeon supports ECC, which is a mechanism for RAM, which ensures greater integrity of data. And this also sounds, ECC RAM also sounds better than standard consumer type RAM. But I will get into details in a moment. So we have a Supermicro motherboard. The Xeon CPU is already installed. This is probably the most difficult step to install a CPU and to install the cooling. This will take, if you haven't assembled any PCs in the past, then this step will take you. This will be the most effort, the highest effort. I already have it assembled here. I'm using passive cooling. This particular cooler or heatsink, if you will, is from Thermalright. It has excellent performance. It has excellent performance, which is more than enough to guarantee that the music server will run cool without any fans, which is very important if you're building a music server. You don't want to have any noisy fans coming from the music server. Not only because the fans itself create noise by moving the blades, but also because the motors in the fan create vibration, and vibration in digital audio is not welcomed. It's a factor that has a negative impact on sound quality. I will get into vibration and other stuff in future videos, because this is also an interesting topic. Okay, let's move forward. So we have a motherboard, we have the CPU and heatsink. What we need is RAM memory, random access memory. Like I said, the Xeon CPU supports ECC type memory, and this particular RAM comes from Apacer, which is a manufacturer of flash storage, USB flash, SSDs, DRAM, and the main branch of the company focuses on industrial applications. So they make components for military, for industrial applications where the components need to stand higher, more rigorous requirements, like temperature range. So this particular RAM can operate from -40 to +85 Celsius degrees. So it is reliable, and based on my experience, the memory from this manufacturer sounds best, and I've been recommending it to customers since 2012. If you googled how to assemble a music server, then you probably came across this brand. So I'm gonna install the Apacer RAM now. Okay. Click. Okay, the RAM is installed, as you can see. Well, it's very easy to insert it in incorrect orientation. There is no way to make a mistake. So I'm sure you can manage this. So we have our music server almost ready. What we need then is storage. For storage, there are a couple options. Storage is where will be installing operating system. I have here an SSD also from Apacer. This is the industrial model using SLC type memory, type flash, which is also the most reliable type of flash. What are the advantages and disadvantages of this type of flash? First of all, it doesn't come in very large capacities because the cells of the flash, this SLC stands for a single layer chip, single layer cell, and this limits the capacity of the flash, the size of the available storage. The highest capacity of SLC type storage is around 1 terabyte or 2 terabyte, and for 1 terabyte I think you need to pay something around $3,000, which is very, very expensive. So I'm using the SLC type flash only for the operating system, and in this case this is only 64 gigabyte capacity, which is enough to install Windows or Linux, whatever you'll be using. I will get into the software part in the next videos. But 64 gigabyte is enough for an operating system and to install music server software, music players like JPLAY or Rune or whatever you'll be using. This will get to the playback software later as well. So this SSD is only 64 gigabyte and it uses SATA, which can be seen here on the motherboard. There are 6 SATA ports on this motherboard. To connect the SSD to the motherboard, you're gonna need a SATA cable. I have my own JCAT reference SATA cable here, and this is a product that is criticized by so-called non-believers and mocked often. How come do you sell an SATA cable, audiophile SATA cable? This is scam, right? Because there is no way that an SATA cable can make an audible difference. Because it's digital, so it has to sound the same, right? Well, no. It doesn't sound the same, and if you're a non-believer, then you can make an experiment. If you have a music server at home using SATA standard, and you have regular generic SATA cables. What you can do is take aluminum foil from the kitchen, wrap around the cable, and listen. Listen, take an A/B test. Listen without first some track that you know really good, without shield, and then wrap around the cable, wrap the aluminum foil around the cable, and repeat the test. I can assure that you will hear a difference. If you have a resolving system, then you're gonna hear a difference in sound. So let me install let me show you how to connect this SATA cable. So we have some SATA connector comes here, and we're gonna connect it to SATA port on the motherboard. So this is I'm showing this to you on a desk, on a table, but this cable is quite stiff, by the way. But we're gonna move it to a PC case later. I will show you the SSD, apart from the SATA cable, which is for transferring data between the drive and the motherboard, requires power. And for the power supply, we're gonna use, for the power supply, I'm gonna show you, we're gonna use the Optimo, no, we're gonna use, okay, I will show you later. Okay, power supply I will discuss in the next video, because this is gonna take too much time. So we have this is a regular SATA drive, but I also have a new product which is world's first audiophile flash. This is also using SLC. I have here the new product, which is world's first audiophile flash storage. This doesn't use the real SLC type flash, but it uses so-called pseudo SLC, which kind of emulates the single level cell flash, but it is much cheaper than the real single level cell flash, and comes with most of the advantages of the single level cell flash. But what is interesting about this product? First of all, it uses Crystec femtoclock, similar as on my other products, USB femto and net femto cards. And it allows you to connect to power it externally. Most drives in this form factor doesn't allow you to use your own external power supply, and this drive does. Other than this, it has audio node JPLAY capacitors, which also improve sound. So alternatively to regular SATA drive, you can use something like this. So this is M2 femto SSD. Most motherboards nowadays available now have M2 slot on available where you can install this drive. I'm gonna show you how to use this. So, first you have to pull this and pick and secure it there. Ready. This model has 320 around 300 gigabytes of available storage, so also more than enough to install an operating system and software player, music server player, music server software, and there will be some room left even for the music files. Okay, if you need more storage, then you will have to install a second or larger drive. This product is also available in 1 terabyte capacity, although in 1 terabyte capacity it doesn't come with the single level cell type pseudo single level cell type mode. Okay, this SSD is also available in 1 terabyte capacity, but for 1 terabyte capacity it uses TLC mode instead of pseudo SLC. What is the difference between the SLC and TLC modes? Well, the difference is that the single level cell has only single level cell flash has only two modes, two operating modes. TLC kind of flash can be programmed in 8 different states. It has eight possible states, and based on the voltage, the controller recognizes the state of bits and transcode it into data. And the SLC type of flash has only 2 states, so it's either 0 or 1. So it is it is the simplest, most forward type of flash, which is probably the reason why it sounds better than TLC type of flash. So the drawback is that SLC, single level type of cells, flash is very expensive, and it comes in low capacities. But like I said, for an operating system, 300 gigabytes is enough, and I recommend using single level cell version for an operating system, because it will sound better. This particular motherboard doesn't have a second M2 slot where you can install a second drive, but you can get an PCI Express adapter, which accommodates even 4 M2 drives, so you can install them inside the PCI Express slot. I don't have it around with me now, so I can show you, but it will be easy to install. Okay, so we have our motherboard, CPU, we have our RAM from Apacer. I installed only 16 gigabytes of RAM. I think that for music playback and for a music server, 16 gigabyte is enough, and I don't see any reason to install more, unless you'll be using memory intensive task. I don't see a reason to install more RAM than 16 gigabytes. But I know that some customers use upsampling, they use Rune, which also requires a lot of RAM. So then if you're going to use Rune and you have you're planning to use this PC to run other tasks as well, other software, then you can consider installing more than 16 gigabytes. 32 gigabytes will be should be optimal. Okay, let's move forward. We have a CPU, RAM, we have our drive for operating system, and what are we going to use when the software is already installed? Let's assume that we have the software installed and configured. What are we going to use for connection to the network and to your hi-fi setup? Well, if you're building such a server, then I assume that you will be using a separate DAC. You won't be using audio output directly from the motherboard, because it will not sound good. It will not sound good. This particular motherboard doesn't even come with onboard audio, so you have to use external DAC. So for connecting DAC, now the golden standard is USB. So any motherboard comes with USB ports. Here are the ports. You can use that, but it will not sound great. So I recommend using a dedicated USB card. This is my product. This is the flagship model of a USB card. It's called USB XE, which stands for Extreme Edition. This card has a oven controlled clock with stability of 5 parts per billion and very low phase noise. It comes with linear regulators, and it has its own dedicated USB chipset. So we won't be using the USB chipset, USB ports on the motherboard. We'll be using the ports on the card. So I'm gonna install the card now. Okay, that was easy, right? So we're gonna use the USB card to connect to your DAC. The card also has a option to use external power supply, which further improves sound. But like I said, about power supplies, I will record another video. And we need, apart from USB, we need network. We need network connectivity. Also, any motherboard comes with network ports. This motherboard has two network ports. We won't be using them either, because I also have a dedicated card for the network. In my previous video, I discussed network tweaks, network components. You can go back to this video. I'm gonna put a link below in the description. So this card also has a oven controlled clock. It has linear voltage regulators, and it has a high performance network chipset from Intel. And we're gonna install this card in a second PCI Express slot. Okay, this is right. So now we have both the USB and network cards installed, and this card also has an external power supply option. So that's pretty much it. The music server is ready. Now we have to we have to install it in an enclosure. At the moment, I'm using a desktop enclosure from Silverstone. It's no longer manufactured, no longer available. But later this month, or in October, we'll be launching our own enclosure, specifically for music servers. So I'm gonna update the component, the list of components for a music server, and you will be able to purchase the enclosure directly from JCat, along with the rest of components, with the USB card, with the network card, with the M2 femto drive, and power supplies. Okay, Let's move forward to power supplies. This motherboard. This is a micro ATX motherboard. The ATX standard is very old and has not changed much during the years. Basically, there are two ports on the motherboard where you need to connect power. First of all, this is this 24-pin ATX connector, which provides power for most of the components on the motherboard. And there is an 8-pin CPU connector, which powers the CPU. You can buy a computer power supply, computer ATX power supply, which are also available in the form of fanless models. There are fanless models, so there are no fans inside. It's passively cooled. But the consumer type power supplies for servers or for gaming are not optimized for hi-fi playback. They are optimized for other things, but they're definitely not optimized for music playback and for high sound quality. So the power supply, apart from the dedicated USB and network cards, is the most important component of any music server. There are many music servers on the market, and their prices range from €100 to €50,000. This is the range is huge. Taking the software part aside, we'll discuss this later. The main difference is in their, first of all, in the processing power and in their power supplies, and of course in their enclosures, the aesthetic factor. So there are a few characteristics of music server. The music server's performance, CPU processing power, the amount of RAM, the capacity of drives. There is a factor of power supply, and there is a factor of aesthetics, so in the enclosure and the overall look and feel of the device, of the component, and of course the software side and then the functionality installed as software. I'm going to discuss the hardware part. Essentially, the high performance music server, which have fast CPUs, higher performance CPUs, larger amount of RAM and higher capacities. These types of music server can run CPU intensive software. CPU intensive software like Roon, for example. Why does someone need high performance high performance CPU and not use Raspberry Pi or something like that, which is small and does not require much power or and it's very cheap. Well, first of all, because it will not run a music server software. Even if it runs music server software such as Rune or Minim server or Twonky or whatever, or of course my own software, JPLAY Femto. Even if it runs, it will be too slow and it will also limit the sonic performance, because the lowest performance music server, which are the cheapest offers on the market, are based on Raspberry Pi and those kind of very small and low performance CPUs, which are available as SoCs, which stands for System on Chip, completely embedded boards, which are often installed in DACs nowadays. I don't recommend using those because, in my opinion, it doesn't sound. It cannot sound good. The digital music library and music server should be a standalone component, in my experience. Of course, if you care about sound quality. If you don't care about sound quality, then this video is definitely not for you. And you can use whatever you want. I don't know. Even you can stream directly from the phone. Okay, so this is so we need a decent CPU performance. At least decent CPU performance in a music server. Whether you need a super high performance CPU is a debate. I personally use a moderate performance CPUs. So the Xeons in the lower range of the Intel CPU offer, because I find it's a great balance between the performance and the power consumption. Of course, the higher performance the CPU, the more expensive it will be, and the more power it will require. The more power it will require, and the more problem we will have dissipating heat. So this is always a compromise. This particular CPU has a thermal design power of around 60 watts. And this heatsink will do the job perfectly. It will stay cool at all times. But I know that some music servers even use 2 CPUs on motherboards, which is kind of extreme. But in terms of pure performance, in benchmarks, in terms of the responsiveness of the server, it will, of course, be beneficial. Whether it's good for the sound quality, it's a different story. Like I said, I in my music server builds, I tend to use balanced configurations because the software I'm using my own playback software and my own music server software has very low requirements for CPU and RAM. It's an extremely optimized software which doesn't need much CPU power. For Rune or HQ player, you're gonna need more power, but this will also be enough, in my opinion. So we have the CPU performance covered. Now let's move to the important part. So what is actually important for sound quality in a music server, apart from the CPU? The most important part is the power supply, like I said. So any good sounding music server, if you want to build a good sounding music server, you need to go install and use linear power supply. The most good sounding music servers on the market use, at least to some extent, they use linear power supplies. At least for digital output, for USB output, or for network, they use linear power supply. The music servers from Inuos, for example, are, by the way, based also on Supermicro motherboards. They use a combination of actually no, they use fully linear power supplies, but they use the motherboard and CPU they use embedded motherboard with embedded CPU, which doesn't require an ATX power supply. So the motherboard they use requires only one rail of DC voltage, and it runs on 12 volt as far as I remember. So they include linear power supply only for this rail and maybe for USB output. Their top model, the Statement, it uses few rails, and that's why it's so expensive, because it is a 2-box music server, and one box is for motherboard and the PC parts, and the second enclosure is for a power supply. Most music servers on the market do not even use specialized USB output. Most of them use output from motherboard, and they put the motherboard in a nice enclosure, and then they pretty much charge for the software package and the nice enclosure. But if you follow my channel, I will explain in details how to prepare software, how to optimize software for music playback, what is important to get good results, good sound quality. I personally started evaluating components, PC components for sound quality in 2011, where it was the beginning of the development of my software player, JPLAY, where I started my experiments with hardware. So I identified what is important to get good sound quality, and based on the knowledge from my experiments, I came up with ideas for my products under JCAT brand, the USB card and the network card, and recently also the power supplies. We don't want you can use a computer power supply for, but I don't recommend it if you want to get good sound quality. But a good sound quality will also cost you a lot of money. So it's up to you what type of power supply are you going to use. There are power supplies, the so-called hi-fi power supplies for computers, but the cheap ones are not too good. Simply because they use cheap parts, cheap components, and it's impossible to get good sound quality with such power supplies. They are very noisy. So the solution is to use a good linear power supply. However, here comes a challenge, because if you are going to use a moderate performance music server, such as this one, then the power supply will have to be also quite powerful. So it will be expensive. What many customers do, is that they use a cheap power supply for a motherboard, for the ATX part, just to get the PC running, and they invest in better power supplies to power just the most important components, the crucial components for our hi-fi playback. So for the USB card and for the network card. So these cards require 5 volts, and the power supply does not have to be very powerful. So 2-3 amps of current is enough, and such a power supply doesn't cost a fortune. I mean, there are expensive power supplies. You can spend a lot of money also on that, but very good results can be also achieved using cheaper solutions, or even when using a hybrid solution. A hybrid solution is to use is to use a computer or a cheap power supply output and filter this output by using a buffer, a power supply buffer. We at JCAT we developed such a product. I'll show you now. For customers who don't want to use fully linear power for their music servers, I came up with an idea of a power supply buffer, and I have it here. This is Optimo Nano. The Optimo Nano, you can use it to filter the power supply, the computer power supply, or some lower end so-called audiophile power supply. So this is it's very simple. It has two connectors. One connector is an input where you connect the dirty power supply, so the cheap computer power supply, and the other port, and this power input, the power coming from the computer power supply is cleaned by 4 linear regulators from analog devices, LT3045. So the same regulators as are used on the Extreme Edition cards, and the filtered power, there is an included cable with every nano we sell. We include a high quality DC cable, which you connect to your USB card or to a network card. So let me show you how to connect the Optimo Nano to the USB card. So there is a LP4 connector, Molex connector. Every Optimo Nano comes with a high quality DC cable, and you can there is a self-adhesive tape where you can tape it inside the music server enclosure. So you can use one output to power the USB or a network card, and second output to power an SSD, or we can customize the DC cable, to use it with two SSDs, for example. Some customers use it to power two SSDs. Assuming that we are using computer power supply or some cheap hi-fi ATX power supply. Why am I mocking this idea of cheap hi-fi ATX power supplies? Well, simply because there are many lies in the hi-fi area in the industry, and some manufacturers claim that they use linear power supplies, and in reality they are not using linear power supplies.